Fanning the Fire Ministry presentation today. I know with this beautiful spring day outside, there's probably a multitude of things you could be doing with your time, and we appreciate you taking that time and spending it here with us. Let us begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, Master of the universe, we give thanks and praise for your Easter resurrection. Send down your Holy Spirit upon us, that we may do your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I'm going to talk just a little bit about our presentation, actually not about the presentation, but about Fanning the Fire Ministry. I'm going to talk about the why, the what, the who, and the how, maybe in that order. We'll start with the what. We'll start the mission statement for Fanning the Fire is to provide and promote the understanding of St. Mary Catholic Community's architecture, art, and liturgical objects to enrich the worship, the service, and the community of St. Mary Catholic Community. Why did we do this? Well, we thought it was good to be able to spread the message of the Roman Catholic Church and St. Mary Catholic Community through evangelization, which is increasing our understanding and appreciation of our facility, our space, and our objects. It'll benefit the celebration of our liturgies through emphasis on full, conscious, and active participation in our liturgies. The ministry will also seek to hand on the vision and heritage of St. Mary Catholic Community to our succeeding generations. How do we plan on doing this? The mission will be accomplished through the identification and development of information, which we will present through information sharing sessions such as this one. Also posting it on the ministry page on our parish website. We're looking at developing guided and unguided tours of the church, and also doing something, no, it's not new to the industry, but to us it would be, a podcast. The sharing of information will align with the seasons of the church, including the traditions and celebrations of our community. The who, the members of the Fanning the Fire Ministry, everybody give a wave. Start with Sandy Ashley, Helen and Joe Beausoleil, Steve McHugh, Belinda Sipe. Wendy is here. She actually got the ball rolling, I think, in bringing us together, and myself as members of the community. So today we're going to talk about our baptismal font. It's appropriate because, one, it's refurbished and looking beautiful, and it's still functioning, right? Sorry I had to ask. And it is the season of the font, of baptism, and our renewal every weekend for our baptismal promises and our sprinkling rite. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Joe to present the font.
And we want this to be kind of loose and fun, so feel free if you have a short question to ask, and we'll have questions at the end. So.
Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking time to do this. It's great to see everybody here. Nice turnout, very nice turnout. And we are, Dawn here is recording this. She's filming this to put on our YouTube channel so that anybody can watch this at any time, anybody in the world. So we did this presentation in February, but the reason we're doing it again is mainly so that we can put this on our YouTube channel. We weren't filming it back then. We didn't have the bright idea to do that. So now we're doing it. And we're going to start here looking at what we have is 4 different fonts that we've had at St. Mary's. We're going to expand this a little bit and talk a little bit about other aspects of our renovation effort that we did 30 years ago going forward. I was the chairman of what we call the steering committee, which was the group of about 15 people that organized and drove the whole renovation effort with our pastor then, Father Ed Hislop, and Sister Mary Jo Quinn, our music and liturgy director. We were the group that organized this whole effort. And Joe Beausoleil, here with me, was the vice chairman of the steering committee. So we have the history, and we're very invested in sharing this history with the rest of the parish. And that's kind of how this all got started last fall. Some people thought we should be doing that. And so we've got this thing going here, this Fanning the Fire ministry to share this history and this story of St. Mary's with everyone. And we definitely are thinking about expanding it beyond just the renovation that we did and talking about the whole history of St. Mary's Parish, which goes back to 1905, when this parish was started. And we can get into that maybe at another time, but today we're going to talk about the baptismal font in particular, and this renovation effort in general. And another thing to point out is that these pictures that we're going to show you we've never shared these with the parish before. We have pictures from the 1990s of what the parish looked like, what the building looked like, the church, before the renovation. And we had those taken very deliberately by a professional photographer. So we documented every space in this church, upstairs, downstairs. Maybe some of you have heard, for example, about the long, steep stairway that went from the church level down here to the social center. And there was a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary kind of on the landing as you were walking down. And we have a picture of that, of what that looked like. We've got pictures of the old kitchen and, all kinds of spaces in here. So we documented all of that, and I'm really glad we did. These are the first time, this is the first time these pictures have ever been shared. It's kind of amazing, but they've just been sitting in a box ever since since we took them. And it's great to be able to get them out. I knew they would come in handy, and now we're able to share that with you. So it's been a long time coming. Now,
No, hey, just so you know, all the pictures Steve told you about are not in this presentation.
all 500 of them.
This is primarily the font.
Right. Yeah, we've got about 45 pictures here to share with you, I think.
Yep.
Anyway, but we have all that stuff documented for future use, all the photos. So we have here this was, I guess, is this our original font, Joe?
Yeah, this is probably the font that was first used after this building was initially built. That was back in 1965. And this is Father Stanaway, and that's the font that we used back then.
The Dolans are here.
Oh, and the Dolans, oh, okay. If you see yourself in the picture, yell. So then, Steve, you can guess who that guy is? Yeah, Monsignor O'Neill.
So let's see, that's the same font, but now you can see some more of the decoration of it around the side of it there. And it's got that, it's round, you can see that, and it's pretty tiny. It's kind of what a lot of people call like a bird bath style font. And it was 1966 that the church actually opened, just to correct you on that, 66. Now, a lot of you know that guy. He's baptizing. Father Ed Hislop is doing the baptizing there. If anybody knows who the people are, feel free to.
Michael and Dale Augustinelli.
Yep.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael and Dale Augustinelli and their baby. Okay, and so that's the second font that we had, and it's portable, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. And our motto in all of this, as you'll kind of see, is it all began at the font. Our Christian initiation as Catholics began at the font of baptism. And so also our renovation effort, as you'll see, also began at the font, because we wanted a permanent baptismal font. The font is integral to our faith life, and it's through the font that we become Christians and Catholic. And so that's the second font. It was portable, and you'll see, I think, next another view of it.
Question, was
Yeah.
that first font in the back of the church and this one in the front?
yes.
This one was portable. It's been in different
Oh.
positions.
Okay.
And as much as there's a rumor that first font actually ended up at the cathedral. I don't know why, because I don't know why we have this little portable one now and not the other one. I know, but these are portable, and they, like, in the previous picture you saw, that font was up by the altar.
Yeah.
Now it's out in front of the altar. Okay,
The
And that's
first,
Paul and Naomi Miller.
Right, right.
yep,
getting married,
Yeah,
yeah.
it would appear.
I don't know why they needed the font to get married, but there it is.
That first font, wasn't it in the back of the church?
Yes, it
Because it
was.
had, you could see that
right,
Yeah,
kind of the screening back there behind it that we used to have
yeah.
back there. Okay,
So then this is the font that we had just prior to the renovation. Okay, and here's a better picture of it from the side. This font was quite a bit larger than the other fonts, and it was, you couldn't move it, it was immovable. And one nice part about it is you could do baptisms through immersion of children and adults. The bad part about with the adults, it was quite difficult to get in and out of it, but we did it. The other thing about it is that font is actually a cattle trough. It really is. It's a round cattle trough that we put a vinyl cover on, and then somebody built an oak frame around it. Okay. It had to be filled and emptied with a garden hose. And the most interesting thing is when we had a baptism, we wanted the water heated up. So you know how we did that? Anybody have a fish aquarium? And you get those little fish heaters? We put 7 of them in there to heat up the water. That's how we did it. So, here is another picture of it showing where it was. And this is a good picture of what the church looked like before we did the renovation. The main door of the church is behind these panels, and the main door, yeah, that's the main door.
the exterior door.
The exterior door, and you'll see another picture of that in a minute. But that shows you where things were. This is looking at the church from the font, with the reflection of the font reflection of the altar ring in the font. That's kind of cool. Now I want to show you something that I did. I got a really cool tool that we can use to change the thing. And look at this. It's even got a little point. So I was really uptown on this, except watch this. Okay, it doesn't work on the flippin' TV. So I went back to old technology. I got a stick with the wire nut on the end of it to point things out. So one of the things I just wanted to point out in this picture before we go on, like Steve said, we're going to be bringing up some of the other things in the renovation as we go through this. But in the old church, here's our prior organ over there. And Steve, where did that come from?
Pardon?
Where did the organ come from, or first?
The organ came from the Vatican Pavilion at the 1964 New York World's Fair. It was used, that's where it was previously used. Built, I imagine, for that event. And then, through a series of happy circumstances, it came to us when we were building this church, which we finished it in 1966, and which was shortly after the New York World's Fair ended.
And this is our statue of Mary at that time, and she's now out in the gathering space. As you first come in, that's her. And one thing that's interesting about her, she's made out of wood. If you go up and look at it, it's just amazing. It's really beautifully done. And then the other thing I wanted to point out here is notice, we had steps to get up to the altar. And that was a huge issue with the renovation because we wanted to make the worship space totally accessible to everybody. So somehow we had to get rid of this. That was solid concrete, so we couldn't blow it out. So we'll show you how we did that in a little bit. Well, I happened to be a member of the liturgy committee back in the early 90s when all this stuff was like this. And Father Ed said we need to get a permanent baptismal font. We have to have something that is worthy of what baptism means to us as Catholics instead of a cattle trough. Okay? And so we actually had enough money in our savings account that we could afford to build or have a permanent baptismal font. We wanted to do two other things. We wanted to have a better sound system, and we wanted to have a bathroom upstairs. There was no bathroom up there. So you had to come all the way down here to go to the bathroom. And if you had mobility issues, you couldn't do it. You couldn't negotiate those stairs. So that's the three things we wanted to do. So we thought, well, if we're gonna do that, we wanna have somebody that really knows how to design a font. And so there was a church architect that Father Ed knew about. His name was Bill Brown, and we brought him in to help us design the font. And we'll have Steve show you about all that. I should back up one more thing. Would you want to talk about that part, about what happened when we brought Bill in?
Well, yeah,
I'll keep going.
you
So
were,
when
that
we
was
brought-
just before I got into it, so he
Yeah.
knows that part of the story better.
So what we did is we brought Bill in, and he said he'd come only if he could worship at all of our liturgies on one weekend. So he did, and he went to all of them. And then he came and he met with the liturgy committee again to tell us what he found. And he said, the font is the least of your problems. He said, when I was here, he said, the people in your community really love to talk with one another and share and just visit. He said, you can see that because after every mass, what are they doing? They don't leave the church. They're standing in the aisles, visiting with one another, talking to each other over the pews and stuff like that. He said, there's no place in this current building for people to visit and to gather. He said, what you need is a gathering space. And we thought, so then he left, and we as a committee started thinking, well, you know, if we're gonna provide a gathering space, that means we gotta really do something with this whole building, and we need to get the parish input before we take on a project like that. And so what we did is we held 3 parish meetings where we told them what we were thinking about and said if we could renovate the church, what would you like to see done? What would you like to see in the resulting effort? Well, it was crazy. I mean, the people went nuts with what they wanted to do. They wanted a church with a gym, a rectory, all kinds of stuff. And it was and then some really, really neat things too. One of the neatest things was they wanted an elevator so that their friends could come down to the social center to be with them when we had events down here. So anyway, we then got together and we started weeding out the things that were just crazy. And we finally got down to a manageable size. And then we brought Bill Brown in again. And we decided that he gave us some estimates on what it would cost. It was going to be about $2.4 million to build it, what we came up with. And we'll hint to a lot of what was changed in that process. But when we did that, we ended up hiring a number of architects and artists and whatnot to help us do this. And that's where Steve can get into. That's where these people are coming from. So go ahead.
Well, just also want to give credit here, the photos of the interior of the church that, like you saw previously, the way it looked before we did the renovation, those were all taken by a local photographer named John Reddy, who you know, some of you may know of. And he also shot, one of those photos ended up as our directory cover, which, for our church directory in 1997. And that, just to give you some time frames here too, the initial, Bill Brown coming up here, being invited up here to look at our situation the first time, that happened in the summer of 1993. I think it was August of 1993. And then a little while after that is when I got invited to come over to Joe and Helen Beausoleil's house and get involved in this. So we had a very small working group initially, and then we expanded that eventually in 1994 into the steering committee of about 15 people. So that group started working really hard on the stuff Joe was talking about, doing all the kind of visioning and stuff about what everybody might want. And then that whole process kept going until finally in the fall of 1995, Bill Brown came back and put on these workshops on the different alternatives that we might consider. And we kind of reached a consensus through meetings here in the main church with Bill Brown kind of conducting them as to what, we reached a consensus as to what the scope of this project would be. And from there we started implementing it. And so there's another group of photographs that were taken in 1998. You'll see some of these, of which this is, back up to the, yeah. That was taken at our dedication, day of dedication, when we finished the renovation, and Bishop Hunthausen came and dedicated our altar. You have to have a bishop to actually dedicate an altar. And the reason we could get Bishop Hunthausen was because at that time we were between bishops. We'd had, Bishop Burnett had left and gone to Seattle to be Archbishop there, but our next bishop, starts with an M. Morlino had not arrived, had not been appointed yet, I think. So anyway, that was kind of a happy circumstance because Bishop Hunthausen, Bishop Raymond Hunthausen, he was retired at that point, but he had actually dedicated the original altar for St. Mary's when it was opened in 1966. So here he was again over 30 years later, dedicating our new altar, which I think is a great historical parallel going on there. But these pictures were taken on the day of dedication when we had a picnic after dedicating the new altar and the new renovation. And those are the professionals that worked with us. Bill Brown, who you've been hearing about, he's the guy kind of in the center wearing a coat and tie, that guy. And then starting on the left is Martin Ratterman. He was from, that guy on the left, yeah, he was from Columbia, Missouri, and he designed the altar and the presider's chair and the ambo.
And the cross.
No, the cross was the guy from Chicago.
Okay.
But we'll get to him. He's not, I think he's in a later picture. He wasn't here for the dedication, but his name was Jersey Canar. He was from Chicago and he was a sculptor. He did the cross up in front and the statue of Mary. I think those are the two things that he did. So Martin is from Columbia, Martin Ratterman from Columbia, Missouri. He did all this beautiful woodwork we had. And when we plugged in with Bill Brown, he had nationwide connections with all kinds of artists, great artists, and he helped us find these people. The next there is Dennis Fleischer. He was an acoustician, and Bill Brown was from Colorado Springs, and I think Dennis was from Colorado Springs too, or somewhere nearby in Colorado. And he did all designed the acoustical system that we needed, that we was one of our main objects when we first started, was to have a better sound system. And he worked on that. and then you have, Margaret, I am sorry, I can't remember her last name, but she was an architect working with Susan Bierke, who's on the right there. Susan was our local architect, and with Margaret, and then if anybody knows her last name, I'd appreciate it. I'll have to track down what her name is. Anyway, and then Susan Bierke on the right, she's our local architect, and she's a member of St. Mary's Parish still today. And she worked with Bill Brown too on this project. And then you have, next to Susan, the distinguished looking gentleman with the goatee and the mustache is Roland Rutz. And he designed our organ. And we knew that we needed a new organ. That was somewhat of a bone of contention, whether we needed a new organ or not. But finally, the new organ prevailed, and we got a different organ. And Roland was instrumental in that whole process. He also found a home for our old organ. I'm not sure where that is, but he was involved with all of that. He's from Minnesota. Can't remember what town, but he's from Minnesota.
So Steve, we gotta go a little faster.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, next. And this was right around the day of dedication, just before that. That's a picture that appeared in the independent record of Father Ed, Sister Mary Jo, and Susan Bierke, and they're standing next to the beautiful art glass. One of the things we wanted to do was incorporate some art into our church. We really didn't have much art before, as you can remember, and some of you will see in these pictures. And we really thought it was important to take St. Mary's to the next level.
That was one of the big things that we talked about on the steering committee early on, is Ed had been a part of a renovation in Butte and had knew about other renovations. And typically what happens when you're working on a church building or renovating it, you run out of money. And the money that should be spent on art and things like that never gets spent because you ran out of money. So you don't have the art, you know, in the renovation or whatever that you would like to have. Well, that was one of the things. We had a whole list of points that we wanted to make sure we hit when we did the renovation. And art was important, really important. In fact, we had 3 or 4 different nationally known artists that worked on everything that was in the church. And we didn't go anywhere and buy, you know, stuff off the shelf from a church store. It was all, we brought the artist in to meet with the parish, to meet with the committee that was responsible for whatever we were working on. And then they came back with what they thought would work, met with us again, and then we went from there. And you'll see a little bit more of that coming. But art was really an important aspect of the renovation.
And we want to pay tribute to the parishioners of St. Mary's who kept this parish going for the many decades before this project was done. They were the ones who got this done, and I'm sure they scraped up every penny they had to get this church built, but they didn't have a lot of money left over for art. So we felt that was something really important that we wanted to add to St. Mary's. And what was that last picture?
That was the steering committee.
Oh, that's a steering committee. You can see we're all a lot younger and slimmer.
Yeah.
And
we even wore shorts.
We wore shorts. That was at the day of dedication, and some of us, a couple of us have passed along. Like, I want to point out Dee King. She's standing in front with the white hair and the blue pants. She was a real driver, and she was, you know, she was the oldest member of our committee, but she was passionately dedicated to St. Mary's. And I always think of our gathering space as being the Dee King gathering space, because she was the most ardent proponent of getting that done. She was very enthusiastic about it. So anyway, it was a great group of people.
So moving along.
So
Okay.
that's
So what we wanted to do is to show you what the church looked like before the renovation. So this is the exterior of the church before the renovation. And Steve's gonna point out something really cool.
This photo was used as the cover. This was taken by John, one of the pictures taken by John Reddy in 1997, just before we broke ground on the renovation. And what he's captured here is, you see this hash mark right here? This is the footprint of the renovation, the new structure,
That's,
just before we broke ground. And we had a ground blessing ceremony, which I think you'll see a picture of. And that's why that's there, is just to point out to the people, when we had this prayer ceremony, this ground blessing, at the weekend masses, where it was gonna be. So that was the cover of our 1997 directory, and you can faintly see those hash mark lines on the cover of your directory if you have one.
so one of the things that will be fun is, next time you're in the gathering space, see these big pillars? 3 of them are inside the new building, inside now.
Oh, wow.
This one is actually in the gathering space. So next time you go up there, see if you can figure out where it is. Okay? So this was the main door, before we did the renovation. And it was the door that was least used. Before we did the renovation, there were 2 exterior side doors, and those doors got used more often than the center door. And the reason for that was that's where the parking was. So it was easier for people to come in that door. The other thing that's important, and this goes back to the other people, you know, when this church was initially built in 65, 66, the people did that not just for themselves, but for us. You know, they passed on what they did to the next generation. And that was our desire, to take what they had, build on it, and pass it on to the next generation. And the name of the project, we called it Shaping Visions, but underneath there, that you can't read, it says from generation to generation. This was something we wanted to pass on. Okay?
That's from the ground blessing ceremony is when that was taken.
Yeah. So anybody know what this is?
Larry's parking place.
Yeah.
Larry's old parking place.
Believe it or not,
Sorry, Larry.
there was a road that used to run between the church and the office building. And this is now the plaza. Actually, part of it's the plaza. This is the exterior door on the side. You know where that door is now? It's still there. When you're in the church and you see that door on the east side, that's his door. Now when you go out that door, you're into the gathering space, and there's a bathroom off to the side and a storeroom. So this is now inside the church. This area all in here is part of the gathering space now. And we made a plaza out of there because the road was considered dangerous, because we had a lot of kids in the youth programs at that time, and they were running back and forth between the 2 buildings. And with cars going there, that wasn't a good idea. Okay, Steve, you're back on.
Well, that's Marty Ratterman again. That's just before the dedication, like a couple weeks before, in August of '98, and he's delivering the altar. He's brought it in a U-Haul or something from Columbia, Missouri, where he lives and works, and he's brought like the candles, the candle holders. He crafted those too, and then that table behind there, below the artwork. That small table, that's his work too. You can kind of recognize his work once you see that he did these things. That you'll know when you look at it what Marty did for us.
And notice that this is something for later. Notice the shape of the altar. It's octagonal. We'll come back to that.
So that's working on the plaza in the summer of '98. That's Gruber. What's his first name again?
Dave Gruber.
Dave
and Frank.
Gruber. His construction company is laying the bricks for the plaza there.
Also, as part of the renovation, we got a new organ, and that's the council for the new organ. We have the art glass, that was a big part of it. The
Now that-
baptismal window that is being, worked on there.
That's the man who, you'll see another picture of him, I think. His name's Ken Von Rowan, he's another one of our artists, and he's come in the summer of '98 to install his beautiful art glass all around St. Mary's, inside, and he's from Louisville, Kentucky. There he is.
Yeah.
That is Father Ed with Jersey Canar from Chicago, and he's the artist we referred to earlier who did the statue of Mary and our beautiful cross behind the altar. And he came in May of '98 to get some input from us about designs he had come up with, and that's his little prototype of the cross that he designed, that he showed to us. There's Marty and Ken there, and do you recognize this piece here that they're standing around?
Preamble?
No?
No?
Tabernacle?
Yeah, that is where our tabernacle rests in our
And of course, it's actually
chapel.
chapel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another big piece that Marty did.
And the Blessed Sacrament Chapel is an integral part of the design of the church also.
That's at the same time in May of '98, Jersey Canar presented us with a prototype of the statue of the Blessed Virgin. And that, there they are, they're looking at the statue that he came up with there.
So
Yeah.
this picture I wanted to show you before we go in along the rest of the way. This shows, again, the picture of the church before we did the renovation. Notice the windows. We got the organ. This was the sound system. We had one of these on each side, that's the speaker. But the big thing I wanted to point out is the step up to the altar and another step up to get to the back of the church. And one of the things we wanted to make sure we did is to make the church accessible. We talked about a ramp and stuff like that, and then we thought, you know, we wanted something to be better than that. And it was really an issue because that was solid concrete. You couldn't get rid of it. So what we did, I should talk about this in another lecture, but what we did is we took out 2 of the front rows of pews. And then since, you know how our floor is sloped, we poured concrete over that whole thing, leveling concrete, and we buried all that stuff under concrete. And that's why the altar is so big. And so now there's no, in fact, we've even had a priest in a wheelchair say mass there at our church because of the, we took out that impediment for people with mobility issues. Anybody can get up to our altar now.
That was Father Stuart Long
Yeah.
of cinematic fame now.
One of the things that this is really cool, this is the art glass guy, and he brought some different samples of art glass that we could choose from in the renovation. And this is really cool. Guess what's going on there?
They're designing the windows.
Yep, those kids are designing the bottom tier of windows in the church. The windows are supposed to depict the area around Helena, around the church. And what's underground are little fossils and stuff. They designed fossils that if you look in that bottom tier of windows, there are fossils in them, and they designed them.
And then you have both, you kind of have you've got the subterranean layer there with the fossils, and you've got the waters of baptism all surrounding the church in that art glass. And then you can kind of see, am I right, the horizon with the mountains up above the art glass.
And there are even
Or up
supposed to be
above the water.
There were even supposed to be earthquake faults because of the earthquakes. But, so, going back to the plan of the renovation, it all mostly centered around the font. We wanted to have a permanent font. And we thought, I wonder if it would be possible to have everybody enter the church and leave the church passing by the font. You know, when you go to most churches, and even our church before we did this, what do you have at the doors? Little holy water fonts, to where you bless yourself when you come in. Those are to remind you of the baptismal font. We don't have those anymore. Why? We have the actual font. And when you come in, you bless yourself, you know, through the waters of the actual font. And that was all a part of our design. So we had to eliminate coming in from the side doors, which we did. We blocked off. You can still use that side door, only to go out. You can't come in. But it's worked, you know, and so everyone comes in through the gathering space and then enters the church going by the font. And that was really an integral part of the design. And notice here, Steve wants to say something about this. What is the shape of our font?
It's 8-sided.
It's octagonal, just like the altar. So, and Steve has something he wants to read about that.
Oh, I just, theology is kind of my weak, not my strong suit. So I just want to kind of read this that explains the theological significance. I think we should touch on that, of the 8-sided shaped font. I got this from a parish in Massachusetts. It's very succinct. It says, the octagon is a fitting shape for the baptismal font because an octagon has 8 sides. The number 8 has significant meaning in Christian symbolism. This is linked to the original creation story in the book of Genesis, where God created the world in 7 days. Baptism is a way in which we go beyond the 7th day, because when we are baptized, we are incorporated into the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is a new creation, the 8th day. St. Paul spoke of this when he wrote, this is in the 2 Corinthians, so whoever is in Christ is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. Additionally, the very resurrection of Jesus Christ, Easter Sunday, occurred on the 8th day, which is the first day of the new week. During each and every baptism, the person who is being baptized enters the tomb with Christ and then rises from it with Christ. This is also why new adult Christians are baptized at the Easter Vigil Mass, which shows this connection between the resurrection and baptism. It is also why most infants are baptized on Sundays, which are mini Easters. And so that's kind of, I think that's a pretty good summary of the theological significance of this 8-sided font that we have. And also I would point out, if you want to do a little research, you'll see on the internet that it's been, the octagonal shape of a baptismal font has been carried on for centuries in our church since early Christian days. Archaeologically, they found baptismal fonts that date back to the early Christian church that are octagon, 8-sided shape. So it's very much part of our tradition to have that 8-sided font.
One thing about the font now is that it's big enough for both infant and adult immersive baptisms. And the other significant part is the font is a part of our worship space. You know, it's not off in a little corner or something like in some churches, and it's tied in with what is on the altar. With the octagonal shape, the font and the altar are on the same main axis of the church. And you can tell it's part of the worship space because look at everybody surrounding the font for various celebrations, especially at Easter. And we have baptisms of infants in there. This is Lacey and Andy and their little daughter.
Who's here?
And obviously that picture was taken during COVID. And all the people standing around. We always invite kids back when we were having the baptism. I don't know how that little girl got her feet like that. And this is actually at the dedication. There's Archbishop Hunthausen there at the dedication. And again, we have all the kids around the font. That's really important to invite everybody back there. And this is at one of the Easter vigils. And there's Deacon Michael helping with the blessing of the baptismal water by placing the Paschal candle in and out of it 3 different times. There's Father Tim at another Easter vigil doing the same thing. And guess who that is? That's Lacey before she was married, getting ready to become Catholic.
And that's Tara Patterson, her baptismal sponsor, I believe, right?
And this is what there's Father Richard getting ready to baptize Lacey, and there she is going up. And this is another person getting ready to be baptized. And now we have a real special treat for you, because we want Lacey to come up and share with you her reflection on being baptized.
Oh, feels like a bigger crowd than last time. I don't have like a podium to like hide behind.
We'll clap louder.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Lacey Galen, which I know a lot of you know me or see me at church. And I've been part of St. Mary's for over 10 years now. I'm part of the OCA team with Dawn. I'm a lector and a Eucharistic minister. And I'm a convert to the Catholic faith. Just celebrated my 11th anniversary last weekend. And I wanted to start by thanking everyone with the Fanning the Fire Ministry, Joe and Steve and Glenda, for inviting me to speak on probably the most meaningful physical attribute for me of St. Mary's, which is our baptismal font. I believe we all have moments in our life that become markers along our lifeline, and they're the places where we can look back and clearly distinguish where a point where our life and the person we are was one way before that moment happened and entirely different after that. And I've experienced a handful of those moments in my life, but none as significant as my baptism and full initiation into the Catholic Church on April 19th, 2014. I was baptized during the Easter Vigil, upstairs in our font like you saw earlier, and it was the culmination of nearly a year of classes in the OCIA program here. But more importantly, it was the realization of 27 years of God working within me in one beautiful moment of grace. And I had the amazing opportunity to be baptized by full immersion by Father Richard. And I remember him telling me about a week or so before Easter, just being mindful of how long my hair was, that I should probably find a way to style it up, because I was definitely going to be getting wet, and I had never even seen a full immersion baptism, I don't think, at that point. So I took him seriously and got my hair all pinned up. So, and when the night of the vigil finally arrived, all I can say is that I was ready. I was ready to be healed and forgiven and claimed by Christ. And when I first stepped into the font, everything and everyone around disappeared. And you saw in those earlier photos, I mean, everyone does come up and circle the font, and all of that really disappeared for me. And I just remember Father Richard pushing my head under the water and just hearing the words of, "I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." And when I rose up after the third time, I kept my eyes closed and felt the water run down my face. And I didn't want to open my eyes because I just wanted to feel that moment for as long as possible. And when I did finally open my eyes, Father Richard, who was in the font with me, had his hand extended down, to help me up from kneeling in the font. And I knew that's who it was, without having to look up and see. But really for me in that moment, it was Jesus's hand extending down to me to help me up into my new life. And being baptized as an adult, is really a unique experience. Not everyone can say that they fully remember their baptism. And for one thing, I can now joke with people that I once sat through half of a mass wearing a swimsuit, because that's all I had on under that robe, unbeknownst to almost everyone there. I also received the sacrament with full knowledge and consent of what I was undertaking. And I got to experience what it feels like to have 27 years of sins wiped away in one moment, which, I mean, the amazingness of, hearing the absolution after you go to confession, it's like that, but on a level that just really is indescribable. And after the vigil, I probably had a solid 12 hours of feeling like I was glowing from the inside out, of being completely free of sin and a new creation. But then, of course, after that, as we all do, we slip back into old habits and realize that we still have a lot of work in front of us. And that I had a lot of work still. And that work was honoring and following through in my baptismal vows. And that wasn't just about attending church and, maybe getting involved in some of the ministries here. At the heart of it, honoring the gift I received and the gift that we all received in our baptisms is about returning to Christ again and again as we continue stumbling along in our faith journeys. And it's about extending gratitude to God for the good moments in our life, but more importantly, about being willing to return to Him as we struggle and fall short of the mark, which we all do. And 6 years after my own baptism, I stood at the very same font again. I stood alongside the same priest, alongside the man who had served as one of my sponsors and had become my husband. And I again made vows to God, but that time it was on behalf of my daughter, who was awaiting baptism. And I was grateful to give my daughter at 3 months old to give her the opportunity to receive the grace I had waited nearly 3 decades for. And I just hope that she grows up having the same kind of faith and church home that has made such a big impact on my life since my baptism. And I'm truly grateful for everyone that's worked to restore the font. It was really hard for me to see it out of commission for so long. And so I know a lot of time and consideration was put into, how it now looks, and it looks beautiful. And I just hope that, we can all take this opportunity with the new font. I mean, we've had holy water still the whole time to bless ourselves, but I hope that we can all take this moment where we have this new font to really kind of take an extra pause and really reflect on our own baptisms when we come in, because I think, we all do that where we get into kind of just the robotic movements of doing different things at church, and I hope that we do pause at our new font and think about our baptism and think about all the blessings and the grace that we received, but especially, how much we were called, what, we're called to do as, kind of in gratitude of those gifts, to go out and to serve and to love others and to share our faith. And so I just hope that, we can just use the opportunity with the new font to just keep doing really good work in our community and in our church. So that's all.
Thank you, Lacey. I really appreciate that.
This is kind of a cool picture. That's Bishop Jeff at another one of our Easter vigils. And then Steve, you were going to talk about the funeral stuff.
Oh, okay. Just about the funeral rite, the baptismal font also figures into the funeral rite that we observe in our church. And again, this is theology, which I may have to read a little of this, but at a funeral, you're once again moving from your earthly life to your supernatural life, and the baptismal font in our church plays a role in that, the holy water. When your casket or your urn is brought into the church, the priest sprinkles it with holy water from the baptismal font and saying, I bless the body of whoever this person is with holy water that recalls his or her baptism, of which St. Paul writes, all of us who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death. And by baptism into his death, we were buried together with him, so that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might live a new life. For if we have been united with him by likeness to his death, so shall we be united with him by likeness into his resurrection. And so then a white pall with a white cloth can be placed on the casket, which recalls your baptismal garment when you were first baptized, the white garment you wore as an infant or whenever you were baptized. And it's placed on the coffin, and the priest may say these or similar words. On the day of his or her baptism, this person, he or she put on Christ. In the day of Christ's coming, may he or she be clothed with glory. And the procession to the sanctuary begins from the baptismal font. It's appropriate that the Paschal candle be carried in the entrance procession. The gospel book, the Bible, or a cross may be placed on the coffin. If you watched Pope Francis's funeral yesterday, you'll notice that there was a gospel book placed on his coffin when his funeral was taking place in St. Peter's Square. That's just part of the ritual. And finally, lighted candles may be placed about the coffin, or the Paschal candle alone may be placed at the head of the deceased. So our baptismal font is with us at the beginning of our life as Christians, and it's with us at the end when we pass into our new life.
So just to start to wrap things up, everyone knows that we've had problems with the font over the last several years with leaks. And everyone, I think, loved the rock work around the font. And that was done by Frank and Dave Gruber. They're the ones that built it. The rock that they used was actually taken down from the exterior of the church. It was removed from that in order to do the renovation. And they came up with the idea of surrounding the baptismal font with that rock. And it was just gorgeous. The problem is, when you have water, you're going to have leaks. And we had leaks in the font. Well, with the rock, it is extremely difficult to get to the leak. We had to get Dave in here, and we had to take all of the top off, we had to take all of the rock off, and then get to the leak. And then poor old Dave had to come back in, and we, the maintenance crew helped him, but all we could do was hand him the rocks. He had to figure out where to put them in and all that stuff. And after it leaked the third time, we thought, this isn't going to work anymore. In fact, he was one of the ones that said, we got to come up with a better solution because we're probably going to have leaks in the future. So the people who actually worked on figuring out how to solve that was Larry Smith. He was the biggest part of it. And there was 3 other guys on the maintenance committee, Jim, Edgar, and Hal Nelson, and myself. And we worked for a few months trying to figure out how to solve it. And we got the pastoral council involved toward the end, and Father Tim, for sure, on the final look. But this is what we came up with. What is significant about this is if we have a leak in the future, each of these panels can be popped off. In fact, we can pop all 8 of them off in probably about 3 minutes. And then we can get to all of the plumbing that's in there. And when we're finished with that, you can just put them up there and push them right back on. And the font looks like it should. So in the future, we should never have a time where the font won't look like this. Because if we see that we have a leak, we can pop it out, find out where the leak is, put the panel back up, go get the parts, pop it off, fix it. So we'll never have a font that isn't, that doesn't look the way it should. The other significant things about this is we wanted the font to be a beautiful piece of furniture that fit into our worship space. It had to be that. And so what we came up with is a design that ties the font with the furnishings on the altar, with the cross, with the altar, and the chairs and stuff. The dark wood matches that. It even matches the tabernacle, the stand that the tabernacle is on in the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. The light colored oak matches our pews. So it's tied right into the font. Another thing, I didn't notice this before until Steve and I were meeting on Friday getting ready for this presentation. The font is octagonal, but look at the tile on the floor. It was designed to be that way. We never even noticed that. But when you go up there, look, it's just set up to be that way. So that's really cool.
And I love the lines on the new font too, that those vertical lines on the wood there that kind of reinforces like the lines where the art glass is up there and where the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, that glass there, it really it's integrated beautifully into its surroundings that the font is with the new design.
And the last thing I want to do is thank all of you, because it was through your donations and stuff that we had the money to build the new font. You know, and we asked for like $20,000 and it didn't even take a month and we had it all. And that speaks to all of you. And we really thank you for that. And that's our font.